Hi, and welcome to Studio 411. I'm your host, Larry Dasilva, and we have a real treat today. We have a multi-talented person joining us today, and we will tell you all about her and her new endeavors. Mary McDonough welcomes readers back to the small town of Oliver's Well, Virginia, in a story of holiday and homecoming as three siblings gather for a Christmas that brings unexpected gifts. And here's a copy of the book right here. Definitely has got what appears to be a Christmas theme, say that 3 times. And also the first in what I believe was a series, and Mary will explain this as we go along, is also her first fictional novel called 1 Year. So we know her, we love her, actress, author, advocate, Mary McDonough. Thanks, Mary, for joining us. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you for making time. The series that you are writing now, am I correct that it is a loosely kind of series of books set in this fictional town?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's set in a town called Oliver's Well, which is a small town in Virginia. And the first one, 1 Year, takes place in 1 year of this Irish-American Catholic family's lives. And it deals with generations of women with a strong matriarch trying to deal with her, particularly daughters-in-law. And this one is the second in the series, and it does have a Christmas theme. You were right about that, Larry. And it is, the house on Honeysuckle Lane. So Honeysuckle Lane is the street that both of the families live on. So there are some crossover characters from the first book, and this one has some siblings that have to come together, and they do it at Christmas time, but they have to kind of wrap up their parents' estate.
So I was correct. I did notice, I hadn't read the first one, but I did read the current release, and I said, why am I thinking that some of these characters, even if they were just referenced, I said, so it's kind of a, if you had to say, what's the population of Oliver's Well?
Oh, that's a really good, I'm going to say
like 12,000, 15,000, or maybe
no, I'm going to say much smaller.
So,
I was going to say like maybe 4 or 5.
Okay, so probably from my limited time spent in Virginia, probably one of many small towns. Now, another thing, where was the inspiration for the using Virginia? Now, I'm going to say that there might have been a Walton's connection there, and you tell me, and I'll tell you why I think that.
They always say write what you know. So I've spent a lot of time in Virginia, and I love all the small towns there. And having gone back there, because there is a very small town called Schuyler, Virginia, which is where the Earl Hamner, the real Waltons are based. The Hamner family is from Schuyler. And I also have spent some time in another small town that has a historical society, which is not in Virginia. But I have actually based a lot of Oliver's Well based on that town.
So, because I knew Earl, who we lost in 2016, was from that state, or I believe.
Yes.
So I thought, okay, well, she obviously is maybe drawing a connection. To get off my list of questions, because his name came up, was he an inspiration, or were you even maybe with the first book or the original concept? Did you ever run any of this by him, maybe to get his opinion?
I didn't actually, but I did on my first book. So my first book is a memoir called Lessons from the Mountain, What I Learned from Aaron Walton. And Earl wrote the foreword for it. And he's definitely an inspiration for Oliver's Well novels in the series there as well. Because, I wouldn't have spent so much time in Virginia if it wasn't for him and for Schuyler and the Waltons. And also, he was just an inspiration as far as being such a great writer and such a wonderful human being. But when I went to him, when I wrote the memoir is based on my life and during the Walton times, my own Irish Catholic family, and then beyond. And it was funny, I went to him and I asked him to write the foreword for the book, and he said, I don't know, well, Mary Beth, if you send it to me, I'm going to have to tell you I won't write it unless I actually like the book.
Wow. There you
so
go.
I was really nervous.
There you go, boy. Tough love, huh?
Yeah, and so I was waiting on pins and needles when I sent it to him, and he came back and he gave me some incredibly wonderful advice, and he said, "I like it. I'm going to write the foreword." So I was incredibly honored and feel so blessed not only to have had him in my life, but to have him to be part of it, of Lessons from the Mountain.
There you go. So I was on the right track. I said, Earl's influence or spirit or whatever. At that point, of course, he was still alive when the first and the second book was being written. I said, I've got to ask. Another thing, and these are just thoughts that are running through based on the answers you're giving me. A few years ago, I thought I saw I want to say a special. I don't think it was any kind of a short-term series. Did you do a thing in Earl's neck of the woods where the late John Ritter? Like it was a.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, that was a really long time ago. So I was a special correspondent for Entertainment Tonight.
Okay.
And I brought John Ritter back to the Walton house for sort of a mini reunion, but a look back on the show. And that was a while ago.
Well, it's not to plug them, but I think I saw it via YouTube, and I thought it was actually kind of like a, like true Hollywood stories type of thing. And I didn't remember, but I remember you were there and you were quite involved. And then, of course, John at that point had, when I saw it, had already passed much too soon. And I just thought, wow, what a cool concept here. And I'm thinking, all this exposure, of course, now is paying dividends with your books. Did you ever think of yourself that you were someday going to become a writer?
Not like Earl. He was such an inspiration because he was so great. But I think through osmosis, I picked up, with Rod Peterson and Claire Whitaker and all the great writers on our show. And Ellen Corby wrote. And so I think just, I picked it up that way. But I always wrote. Even before I started the show, I wrote plays and put them on at my school and in the backyard. And I wrote all the time. So I never really thought that would be my career. But, and it is just one of my careers.
As I've learned in life, sometimes the hard way, never say never. You're saying, oh, that'll
Exactly.
never happen. And lo and behold. Aaron Walton, folks, Mary McDonough joining us here on Studio 411. Mary is very elusive. She's so busy that she is literally, you have to almost tackle her to get her on, but hard work and perseverance. And we thank also Karen Orbach from Kensington. Am I pronouncing Kensington Books, which has put out all three of your books. I didn't realize the memoir was also from Kensington.
It is. Kensington doesn't do a lot of memoirs, so I was really fortunate to have a hero there in John Sigmilio. And he loved the book and he loved the Waltons, and so he was a champion for it. And then they came to me and said, do you think you could write, we'd love to do a couple of novels. And I thought, wow, okay, so I've written screenplays and I can adapt something and learn a lot and fast. And he's like, oh, no, it's all good. But then we came to terms like, what would they be like? And Kensington does a lot of women's fiction.
Yes,
and
exactly.
I said, well, I don't, write some of that. I'm not going to write historical fiction, but I, as a life coach and someone who does a lot of public speaking, I wanted the books to be about topics that I cared about. And there's a through line about women and people getting along and communication and about family. And that family isn't necessarily always your blood, but it's all the people that you love and who are your community. And so they were very keen on that. So it worked out really well. And, having, had a lot of really strong women in my life, for 1 year, the Mary Bernadette character, it doesn't matter. She's a combination of a lot of different women. And I've had people tell me like, oh, wait a minute. My mother-in-law is just like her and we're Jewish. Oh, we're Italian. I know her. So anybody who's had a strong woman who's very dominant in the family, it doesn't matter what culture you're from.
Totally transcends both cultural, ethnic, parameters.
Exactly. A strong woman is a strong woman.
That's
and
right.
They run families with an iron fist sometimes. It doesn't matter where they're from.
And a mediocre guy, well, enough said. So, oh my goodness. Let's see. What was the in the book at the beginning? You dedicated the book to all the orphans out there. Tell me a little bit about what that meant and what inspired that comment.
So my mom used to call anybody who had lost both of their parents, whether it was from birth or an accident, or whether through, just age, or whether they were orphaned. She always used to say, "Oh, so-and-so is an orphan now." And in the house on Honeysuckle Lane, the kids are kind of orphans now, even though they're adults. And when my mom died, because my dad died when I was 16, so when my mom died years later, I felt like I was an orphan, just like my mom had always said. So I think a lot of people in this sandwich generation, we're going through a time where we lose our parents and we need to be responsible for them, whether it's their health later in life or whether it's going through all of the stuff they left behind. And this is a story, and I've done it. So this is a story about siblings and the different kinds of ways they reconcile losing their parents and going back to dealing with who they were and what their place is in the family. And also, it's a lot about attachment, like the things that we get attached to, whether it's the emotional baggage or whether it's that teapot that we always thought we would get, or whatever it is. So yeah.
See, I can just focus the camera on Mary because my next question was, quote, the book main theme, would you say, is about attachment, Mary? So,
oh yeah, good. Yes.
And I tell you this, and I always say this, and people are like, why do you say that? Because but it's true. I am not a fiction reader by habit. I am a nonfiction person. So I always lately with the program, I've been finding myself happily good experiences with several guests off and on when it's not music or sports or politics, whatever, having fictional authors. So then I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to go through this and then you just have to kind of dive in and just kind of let it take you away, and use your imagination. Whereas I'm more about, the Battle of 1812 and
right.
Appomattox and civil rights and, Martin Luther King and all that stuff. So it's, it's sometimes a little bit of a transition for me. The books as a whole, both age group and kind of niche, where would you say these fit in? It's not young adult fiction, it's more like women's literature, or what would you call it?
Yeah, a little bit like women's literature, and I would say the youngest character in 1 year is in her 20s, and so it's about these women who marry into this family, and they love these men, but they have a hard time dealing with this woman who's the mother-in-law and then also the grandmother-in-law, and so Alexis is in her 20s and she's madly in love with this guy but didn't realize what she was getting into with this family where there's a lot of expectation and holidays are done, and so she goes through her learning curve and trying to deal with her, and then people in their 40s, and then Mary Bernadette is in her 70s, so it's 3 generations of women. And I find that is an interesting through line as well. What traditions do you learn and pass down, and what do you just buck, and how do you find your place in a very strong family?
Sure. You find, and as reading this book, and again, I did not necessarily go through this myself, but I've heard horror stories and people that I've known. When someone passes, all of a sudden, I don't want to use the word vultures, but all of a sudden everyone comes out because they're looking for stuff, if that makes sense. It's like kind of, where were you when this one needed you, or at least have the decency to, if someone passes and you were estranged from that person, at least, don't show up and act like you care, and so,
there's some of that in there.
Yeah.
And it's that whole attachment, and there's also that entitlement, and there's also, dealing with the loss, and also, you don't have parents anymore. You're an orphan. So how do you deal with the memory of your parents and where you are in the family as well? So there are people who feel. I had a woman tell me a really, really lovely story when I told her I was writing this book, and she said, "Oh my gosh, you have to write this book because everybody goes through this." I mean, she said, we had this situation where there was this item, and I remember very specifically that my mother gave it to me. And when we all went to like divide things up, the sister said, "Oh no, that's mine. She gave that to me a long time ago. That was always been mine. I was there when she bought it," and which is actually on the back of it. There was a note that actually said that it was for the other sister because the other sister was there when she bought it. But the little sister had remembered hearing the story and just figured it was her.
Yeah.
And grief does such horrible things to people sometimes, and trying to, one of the characters in The House on Honeysuckle Lane is sort of like a very like guru's, spiritual person, like, oh, no attachment for her. She, obsessively quotes the Buddha and Rumi, and and suddenly she finds herself at one point very attached to something, and it's sort of not her thing, and so she thinks, wait a minute, what is this about?
Yeah, because again, we as human beings, I hope so, are constantly in a state of learning flux, as I call it, where we don't all know everything. If we do, then turn the lights out and let's call it a day. You know what I mean? Or like I was saying to so many people, let's say, well, what am I going to do when I retire? Oh, I'm going to do nothing but kick back. I'm like, then here's a shovel, start digging the hole, because if you think you're going to retire at 60, 62, 66 in 8 months, all of a sudden, but you have to have plans on what you want to do, but all these things that you talked about and I just mentioned, are all that unknown. What we don't know, we think we do at 20, what it is like at 40. And you and I, because we're both from those kind of Eisenhower Kennedy babies, there is no way. As savvy as I thought I was, and I'm sure being in the business you were in, our stuff doesn't stink, everything's good. And meanwhile, you know what? You look back now and say, wow, it probably was savvier than some of your contemporaries, but in reality, there's no way that you could know what the parents, the Reynolds parents were going through, or some of the other characters, or what Earl or Ralph Waite, some of your co-stars. Again, they all have good points and they had their problems, but unless you're in their shoes, you can't fully appreciate what they go through. I'm giving
it's
her
true,
ideas.
And I think some of the mystery about House on Honeysuckle Lane is that the kids actually start to learn some things about their parents that they didn't know. Exactly. And I know that was true with my mom when I found things she had written, and I was responsible to kind of pull everything together in the final taxes, and it's just something that you don't think you're ever going to do with your parents. I mean, you think, I will be there, but you just don't think, oh, I have to do paperwork. I have to find things to put it together. So, and while you're going through the grief and the loss at the same time, and it hits everybody in a different way, and people respond. And then when you find out things that make your parent a little bit more human, and, you might not want to acknowledge that they might have made some mistakes or had, misjudgment, because you put them on a pedestal and think, oh, gosh, they were everything. Yeah. And then it's very interesting to see and to have to go through what people have left behind, and to try and sift through what that means to you and to the rest of your family.
Yeah, exactly. Mary McDonough, actress, author, advocate. The new book, The House on Honeysuckle Lane, Kensington Books. Website for more information, www.marymcdonough.com. Where was I going with this? My head is exploding. I have so much to cover with Mary before she cooks dinner. So, what's the best thing about being a writer?
Oh, it's rewarding. When you touch someone's life, they always say, if you have touched one person or made one person think, then your life is valid. So having had people come and say, oh my gosh, this really helped me, or that really touched me, or I was just able to lose myself in this story, I could so relate to this character, that's very rewarding. So that's what's really fun. The alone time, and that's part of it, is very isolating, but I'm an extrovert a little bit, so getting out there and meeting people at book festivals and book signings is really fun.
And what advice do you have for young aspiring writers?
Write 1,000 words a day.
Now, what is your regimen? Like a guest I had recently, and many others that I've talked to, both on and off this program. Again, 5 to noon, or 8 to 3. In other words, that they treat it almost like it's kind of their shift job. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And kind of like everything's off. Don't bother me. Don't call me. Somebody better walk the dog because I'm busy. Or like, for instance, where you are in your home studio there, kind of like shut the door and I'm in my little tranquility there. Do you find that, or?
It has changed for me over time. I know people who unplug phones and lock themselves in closets. I have not had to do that yet. Yeah, it depends. Like when I was raising my kids and I had to, it's like find time any time you can. So I never had a set schedule. I would like to do morning, after school drop off and before pickup. So you're talking, 8 to 2:30. And then later on, but to me, it's on airplanes. I write on airplanes because you finally get some alone time. Anytime you can, just write. And then I use my phone a lot now. I wake up in the middle of the night and I'll think of, oh my gosh, this is how this happens. And I just hit note and I talk into it, and then I go back to sleep.
It's like that commercial where the wife goes, "Who are you talking to?" And it turns out he's talking to an insurance male. But again, in Mary's case, she's just talking to herself. So the husband can just roll over and go back to sleep.
Exactly. So, and it doesn't have to be so specific as long as you can just get it done. And sometimes I will go out. I live in Denver now, and there's this beautiful botanic garden. So when the water lilies were in bloom, I went and just sat there and looked at the water lilies, and then I wrote. My next project has something to do with water lilies in France and stuff, so it was very inspiring. So
wow.
Go wherever you have to.
An international flavor coming up from Mary McDonough, France. There we go.
Yes. Pictures on the wall, pictures everywhere.
Set a mood, something on the ceiling there. The book's main characters, of course, as you mentioned, siblings, Andy, Emma, and Daniel Reynolds. Again, each one kind of struck me a certain way. Daniel, again, without giving away too much of the plot, seemed like almost overwhelmed by, having to be thrust into being kind of the caretaker, as you mentioned, of the parents. The father had passed, mother had passed within a year or so of this story kind of taking place. Andy, kind of the bohemian one of the, what would you say? She's an author in her own right, a writer. Yeah.
Sort of new agey, guru-ish, think like Brene Brown,
Okay.
Liz Gilbert, that sort of people who are out there and sort of, a non-traditional way of dealing with life and something a little bit more progressive.
And as people will see when they read the book, again, it's the kind of that thing where it's just very non-traditional, that particular character. And then you've got Emma. Is Emma the youngest of the three?
Daniel is.
Oh, Daniel is. Oh, no wonder he's stressed. Okay, so Emma's the middle one, if I recall. And she certainly seems like, she's got herself together, although she's kind of in a so-so relationship, and then sometimes we're in relationships for maybe the wrong reasons, and turned down a chance to work for her father's business, and then all sorts of things happen. But again, it's
the family history comes in, and I think when you lose your parents, there is a mortality thing there too, and you actually look at your life and you look at what you process the stuff you went through as with your parents, and where you fell in the family. And she's the middle child. I'm the middle child. And on both in the Waltons and here. So and then you start to take stock and think, well, wait, hey, what really matters to me? What matters to me in life? And I think when you lose your parents, you really look back at your life and your family. And that's certainly what she does.
Do you buy into that there is kind of we'll say with females, three sisters, okay, middle, oldest, and youngest, that whether it was on the Waltons, of course, fictional writing, or in your own life, that there is kind of similarities. In other words, the oldest tends to be maybe more worldly, the middle child is more reserved and kind of afraid, and might have issues of confidence or esteem issues, and although that can apply to someone, I'm thinking a younger child, where they had issues that either bulimia or I'm blanking on the other one. But anyway, things that obviously stem from problems inside themselves. Self-confidence, I think. Do you find that kind of like is common with a lot of, three sibling girls, or I shouldn't generalize?
I think that it can shift around a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, the Waltons had three girls, and certainly my character, Aaron, was the middle, didn't have a sense of self, felt like the baby was the baby. And then Mary Ellen was strong, tomboy, and smart. So Aaron kind of felt in the middle, and she was nowhere.
Yeah.
Here, the youngest is a boy. So with Danny, he's, but he's sort of like the baby and a little bit spoiled. And so then when he has to take on this role of caring for the parents, it's hard for him in a way. And yet, there is a sense of honor of being the caretaker. Whereas, and when I think more than anything in this story, it's not where they fall in the family. It's who stayed in the town where the parents and where they were raised.
Right.
And the other two kind of went off.
Mary McDonough joining us for the hour here on Studio 411. The book, The House on Honeysuckle Lane, MaryMcDonough.com, published by Kensington Books for more information. Reading the book, I got the notion that the characters... And I'm curious too how it works from an author standpoint. Difficulty maintaining close relationships, but yet this book is set in present times, whereas I would buy more into that if it was 1950, 1850 and beyond. But now everybody is so locked in that they tweet, they this, they do. I didn't see that car coming because why? Because they're on media that. It's funny that how today siblings would have that issue, that they would have trouble, even though in Andy's case, she might have been out of the country, perhaps.
She's in the ashram.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's in the ashram a lot and doesn't put a lot of value on that kind of communication. And I think the thing is that they do text each other and they do have email and, that sort of stuff. But I think the closeness that the book is really about is how even with so much communication in our lives right now that sometimes we don't ever really get underneath that surface stuff.
Exactly.
We don't go underneath and below all of that. Oh yeah, how are the kids? Great, I'm sending presents to the niece and nephew for Christmas, and I've got the birthday presents. It's all kind of the superficial stuff, and when you have to get in, and the book sort of like goes underneath it, where they have to go, wow, why am I having this reaction? Because what is seemingly so nice and put together, and it's a town, and there's image and stuff, and they're kind of forced because of all of this to go deeper.
How do you plan out your storylines now? I know the old-fashioned way, because one author I had on recently, people used to map things out either on these giant boards, and now I understand there's software where people can kind of do that more as opposed to having their wall, laced.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Mary is going to tear the wall off.
Like this?
Oh, okay, very good. So you're an old school girl. There you go.
There I go. There's my. Yeah.
Excellent. But I will find out what that program is. I'll send it to you because somebody was just telling me that it's revolutionary. It just makes
it's a thing where it webs it for you and it puts it into the thing. But I'm a visual learner. That's why I said I put photos around. I have them on the desk, and then I kind of start like I'm writing a term paper.
Okay.
When I first come up with the idea, so we said, well, what is this going to be? Same town, Christmas theme, and I was a primary caregiver for my mom, and I did lose both parents, and so I kind of write what I know. And I have a lot of friends who've gone through the same thing recently, and we were kind of sitting around and thought, well, how could I write about this? And I heard a bunch of stories from other people, so this is not my story in here. It's a lot of people combined. And I thought, yeah, that is an interesting thing to go through. And so many of my friends are going through this that I thought, I'm just going to kind of write about that. So then I figure out who are they? Who is the family? And I kind of start an outline form. And I just sort of say, what's the beginning, the middle, and the end, and then I always go back to what is my purpose. That's my big through line is why am I writing this, and what is my purpose in this?
I'm just amazed, and again, I'm kind of flipping these because both books we're talking 1 or 2 pages shy of about 400 pages. I mean, that is remarkable that you can even keep, everything together. It reminds me sometimes, and I don't know if this ever happened on the Waltons or any other programs that you might have done, episodic television, where I'll use an example from MASH. Colonel Potter had a daughter. Early on, though, they said he had a son and a daughter. But of course, when you have different script writers and their hands are involved, I don't think, because they're not all on the payroll. They're not there every script reading. They might come in, like you said. You might have Rod Peterson, or you might have Ellen do a story, or Richard Thomas might have directed something. Everyone's not going to remember. Do you find that ever happens, or that you catch yourself, wow, I'm repeating myself, or worst case, I'm repeating something and it's not consistent with what I said before?
Well, it happened on the Waltons. I said there. Yeah, so we would have, there would be big fights with that. I mean, there's like a Bible that you have, and the Bible is the timeline and the people. And a lot of times I will put that on the wall. I will be like, here's this character analysis, and wait a minute, what year was that? Okay, so then she would be, and I have to just look at it to cross-reference it all the time. But yeah, you definitely go back and think, did I already establish the book? Did I establish the book? Oh my gosh, where did I? So I keep notes for myself about like, oh yeah, at chapter 4, I established that the book is brown and leather and it's worn and here's what it looks like. And I just sort of keep notes that way, because on the Waltons, when like 2 things would happen. When we came back to do the reunions, the network sort of decided that they didn't want to have as many family members. Exactly. So Jason had a bunch of kids, Ben and Cindy had a kid, and it is like the thorn in our fans' side. They're like, well, what happened to baby Virginia? All they did was say she died. And then they got the other one, and then where did he go? And then where was John Curtis? Mary Ellen, and then Mary Ellen had a hysterectomy, but somehow she magically got pregnant again after she remarried. So there's those inconsistencies, and then between the network people who come in and they say, well, we don't care, nobody's going to remember those kids anyway. But I have to tell you, our fans are very specific, and it still
any show
bugs
remember
them as much as it bugged us when we went to film it. And then one time we had a director come in, and they wanted to make it easy to shoot, they wanted to change our places at the dinner table. We were like, no. We all sit at a specific place. And like, well, but I don't want to do all these extra no. And then, and then another time we had someone come in and they wanted to put somebody in Will's chair after he had died. And Grandpa's chair stayed empty. Sure. Until Jonathan Frakes got to sit there, but it was years later. It was like he was the only person that was allowed to sit there. But they want to move you around. He's like, no, that's not how it works.
Sure. And I have to mention Jonathan Frakes, who was really just Jonathan Frakes' actor, later became, and I'm forgetting the character, but later became a big star on Star Trek Next Generation.
Number 1. He was
number one, and is now a fellow writer such as yourself, correct? Because he's a best-selling author as well.
He's multi-talented and my favorite love interest ever.
Okay. Uh-oh, I dug too deep, folks. Look out. Clear that chair from the table. There we go.
That's right. He got to sit there. He was special. He still is.
Woodville
He's a director. I mean, he does everything.
Yes, oh yeah. And he's married to someone famous, and I'm just blanking.
Jeannie Francis.
Jeannie Francis, that's right. There you go, from General Hospital. See, that's it. Woodville Junction is a town that's mentioned in the book, and I had this discussion with another author recently where I happened to mention off-air towns because it reminded me of one called Whitewater Junction, Vermont. And the person goes, so, and they had, like yourself, sounds like you'd never heard of it. But they go, oh, I could see their mind writing it down like, oh my God, that's a great town for a book, for a storyline. Do you find that from your time in Virginia, or maybe from Colorado, or time spent in California, that topics or towns come to you, or names of characters, and you write it down? And
I do.
Okay.
I do. It's one of the things I put into notes. I was, or just tiny things that I noticed. I was sitting in a cafe, and this woman was so distinctive, and she knew everyone was looking at her, but she didn't let off, but she was so, she drank her tea in a certain way, and she squeezed her lemon, and I just thought, oh my gosh, that woman, she knows everybody's watching, and I just was like fascinated with this. So I took my phone, and I was like, as she sat at the she sucked every juice out of that little piece of lime, and it was just so fun.
She's dictating to herself here, I'm telling you.
I was like, yes, and I just like, I don't know where I'll ever use it, but I will. And when I was after finishing, or in kind of the middle of, before big edits on Honeysuckle Lane, I had gone through a lot of small towns in Virginia, and I took a lot of pictures of front porches, and I sent them to Kensington, and I said, these are small town houses with porches, and they're decorated for different holidays, and I got them around Christmas, and so it doesn't really have anything to do with it, but I love just having all of those pictures and those visuals.
We have some in Connecticut, although sometimes I think not as many as we used to have, but that could be said of any town or state. But the kind where it's in the front, and then the ones that even curl around the side, and
I love a wraparound porch.
Right, but where the wraparound is,
my dream house has one.
Yeah, where the wraparound is, it's almost got kind of a circular, like a semicircle effect, and then it goes there, and so people can kind of like go there, and of course with the Waltons, you need all the room you can get. So.
Well, and I think the reason I'm drawn to that probably too is because the Waltons had a front porch with a swing and chairs, and there was a lot happening out there. Whether Grandma and I out there were shucking peas, and so I think I'm drawn to the area. And I haven't had a house that has a wraparound front porch yet.
Yes.
There's time, Larry.
Exactly. There you go. One thing in chapter 5, there was a mention of their father, obviously recalling their late father. And I was taken aback to my late first father-in-law, because there was a quote about resting his eyes while reading the paper. And right away I was taken to my late first father-in-law, who wasn't so much the paper, would be the TV would be on, and we'd all be like, we want to change this channel, we want to watch the ball game, whatever. And as soon as someone changed it would instantly wake up like, oh yeah, I'm okay, I'm watching it, and so I put it back, so, and I think in my middle age, I think I'm starting to do the same thing, so I don't know.
Yes. My dad usually could not fall asleep unless he was watching television. It just would put him out, and he was so busy all the time. So I think there's that moment of like, I'm just resting my eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Just resting the eyes.
It's a cat nap. Anything more than 15 or 20 minutes and it ruins your day.
Now, how many books, or is it kind of open-ended at this point in this, we'll call it Oliver's Well series? How many are you kind of storyboarding? Because again, it sounds like you have aspirations even to take it to another level. And I know.
Yeah, and I have a lot of other books that I want to write as well, and some of them may be in the Oliver's Well series, and some of them may not be. And right now we have no plans. Right now we're in talks about a possible third book, but there's nothing in stone right now. These first two were just sort of put out there, like we'll do this one and that one. But there are other characters within the town now that I kind of love, and the sort of the eccentric wealthy woman who has the house. I have a storyline for her, and a love story, and and to put that together, and I envision Oliver's Well as a television series.
I know there was some talk about movies and stuff, but movies is such a such a big, you have to get financing and everything. I'm sure you do with TV, but it's just so much work into this one project, whereas with a TV series. But how would you handle that? I mean, I don't even know how Earl would handle it. He did the TV movie, then the series came on. Mm-hmm. Like many, the first year, 2, 3, whatever, it depends on the individual. They're very active, and then they kind of acquiesce to a stable of writers. Your family wouldn't see you because you'd be, I know you've got a lot of ideas up on the ceiling there, but I mean, if I said to you, okay, in 2 months it's going to go to series, you're going to extract maybe 8 or 10 or 12 episodes from these 2 books, hypothetically.
Right.
But then, all of a sudden, boy, you're going to be looking in that shoebox at those notes and Post-it notes, and
Well, but also I think, for me, I see the town, and so I sort of look at it as so many people have said to me, we wish that there was a show like the Waltons now. There'll never be another one. Because it was its own particular time. But I have so many people say there are no good shows on, there's nothing decent to watch anymore. And if I had a quarter for every time somebody said that to me. So when I went to write the Oliver's Well series, I really thought about what everybody who had come to my Lessons from the Mountain memoir book signings had said to me. And I thought, maybe there is a place for people to read books that are about family. And there's I always say there's no sex, drugs, or rock and roll in them. But then I thought, well, maybe there might be a place for, like a Hallmark or an Inspiration Channel to kind of have either movies of the week or a town, and not that we wouldn't deal with any current day issues,
right.
But it's just about a community of people getting along. And I think that is something that people are missing so much in this country. So whether it becomes a series called Oliver's Well or not, I have great ideas for how, you can talk about community and family and people coming together. And it's not that you have to live on a farm, but I just think, look at the state of where our country is right now. I think that there's a huge chasm, and I think people are really going back. And I have people who are 3rd and 4th generations who are watching the Waltons with their grandkids, and they watched it with their grandparents. And there's some kind of through line about family is what you make it. And having a sense of community is a great sense of strength. And I think people don't feel that so much right now.
Exactly. So, an idea I had, and again, I don't know the gentleman, I don't know that you know him, Dick Wolf, who's the guy that has done the Law and Order series and countless other, installments. But again, I was thinking, boy, that'd be a good guy to talk to, because what they do, he and his people, they draw stories, in this case, crime stories, police stories, from the headlines. My point to you is, to do, let's say, an Oliver's Well or any type of series that would be an Inspiration, Hallmark, Lifetime type show, you can do the same thing. There are so many good things out there. You just have to mine, and then obviously with your imagination and, again, using it as an inspiration, not telling it verbatim as it happened. I think those, quote, good news stories are out there. It's just that it's easier to write about, the sex, drugs, and I like rock and roll, so I'm not going to diss that.
Well, and when I went to do Lessons from the Mountain, it was very hard to get it published, because as a former child star, people just, there are a lot of us who have not made it and who are dead or have had some serious issues. And I took some really tough things that happened to me in my life, and I ended up going and becoming an advocate for women's health issues and lupus and the whole breast implant body image issue. And I went to Washington, D.C., and I became a citizen activist. So part of the book talks about that. And I actually had publishers reject the book because I wasn't in rehab and I hadn't slept with any rock stars. And that's, and one of them actually said, but she actually did something positive. Nobody wants to read that.
Amazing.
Nobody wants to know that. Amazing. They want to see her fall down and crash and burn and, and I thought, wait a minute, I don't know if that's really true.
May she rest in peace, but not all stories end like Dana Plato and so many other unfortunates in your business, and again, just in normal life, not celebrities.
Most of us end up, former child performers end up with some, and not that I didn't have mine, but I was really lucky. I had 2 families. I had my own McDonough family, and I had my Walton family, and some really great women in my life, and role models, and between Ellen Corby and Michael Learned, and all the people that I had 6 mothers, because I had every kid on the show had a mom that was a role model. So I was lucky.
There's a quote that is attributed to Emma in the book, and of course Emma got it from Mary, because Mary wrote the book. There is a danger of success, losing the rest of your life in the process. Do you find that that's something that either did happen, or do you worry that it could happen to you if, for instance, successful as you are, but of course with, more fame and more success to come? Do you kind of like heed your own words there and say, put them in the back of my head?
I think I wrote it as a caution. Yeah. It's a cautionary tale because I have had that kind of success and certainly had my own pitfalls from it. I had difficult moments that came from it. So I do think about that. I think if I hadn't dealt with all of my emotions, my eating stuff, my body image stuff, and I had launched into being the career, successful person that I wanted to be, I don't know that I would have made it. I think it would have been more confusing. So I think about that in the back of my mind, like what's worth it, and is losing yourself, and certainly there is always that part of me that wants to have that success. I wanted to be on movie posters, not a poster girl for a disease.
Right, exactly.
It was sort of not my plan, but I don't know what would have happened to me had I gone that path. And now I have a very lovely life. I have great kids and a great husband, and I feel very blessed and lucky. And that may, with all the confusion, had I not been able to sort that out, I may have ended up as statistics like most of our former child performers.
My belief in life, again, one of them was, never say never, but the other one is kind of like, I really believe in that. I call it the It's a Wonderful Life kind of syndrome. If the slightest thing would have been different, I would not have met this individual. I would not have done this. I wouldn't be here talking to you, whatever, good, bad, or indifferent, those things would be altered. And I think people don't realize that. That's just a movie, No, it's more than that. But again, people will sit and watch something or read this book, The House on Honeysuckle Lane, and everybody will take something different from it. That's cool. But then when something is so obvious and then only 30% of the people see it, that's troubling, And,
and there are people who won't like some of the characters. So they go, "Why? She's just a brat, or he's just selfish, or why can't they get along? Like, what's going on?" But it happens.
Sure.
It happens in life.
Mary McDonough joining us for the remaining few moments here on Studio 411, the book, The House on Honeysuckle Lane, Kensington Books, also the first in the series, 1 year. For more information on Mary and all her stuff, as we say, is so busy. It's more than we have time. It would take me an hour just to tell you the things she does. Just to take my call took more than an hour, folks. Okay, but thank you, Karen Orbach, for that and more. And she'll even have this as a blog. Like, yes, annoying little man had me on his show today. But anyway, www.marymcdonough.com. In our remaining moments, you've been really great about touching on some of the Walton stuff. You've mentioned her a few times. Ellen Corby, obviously with your young children back in the day and with you as a young adult, tremendous influencer person in your life, even after the show ended.
Oh, absolutely. Well, she and my daughter were born a couple days apart, so we always used to go and celebrate their birthdays. And she always used to talk about that they were Geminis, so it was, that they were special. Schizophrenic, I would say. But Ellen what people don't know about her is that she was very kind of like, the Andy. She was, went to India. She studied yoga. She had a new age, like Buddhist lifestyle and understanding. And I remember one time, you have all of this creative visualization and, put it out there and think it and it will come, and vision boards and all these things. Ellen Corby taught me that when I was a kid. And she made me hold her Emmy. And she's like, I want you to really feel this, and I want you to visualize yourself as winning one day. And so, all of this, things that, everybody's talking about now, Ellen was doing it a long time ago. So she was an incredible woman, strong, gifted, spiritual, and tough.
And she directed at least two that I know of, episodes of The Waltons, which even for that time, again, that was like being in a class with like Ida Lupino.
She wrote 2 episodes.
She wrote. I thought she directed. No, okay, my bad. So I thought she was going to say, but she still was in that. Like Ida Lupino. When I was in college, I took a film course, and Ida Lupino who was later married to Howard Duff. and a divorce, kind of like a Brangelina type deal. But anyway, it was very much into being this kind of B movie director, but would never get a shot like some of the women today because we all know why, but still whatever she did a great work, and Ellen directed. Or wrote rather a couple of episodes. I don't know why I thought she directed too.
She had a book too. She wrote a book as well, and so yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Now we talked earlier off air. How do you like traveling the country promoting the book? And of course, folks can go to Mary's website to obtain any updated information as the days and months go by. But you do a lot of traveling, which is great.
Yeah, I do a lot of public speaking. I'm a certified life coach, so I do a lot of speaking about my own issues and overcoming, and hopefully inspirational. And so I get to incorporate that and go speak to young girls and boys about their self-esteem, and I'm lucky that way because I'll do book signings at the same time. And I love meeting people, and people always say, "Oh, don't you ever get tired of hearing about the Waltons?" Well, and I never do. Everybody has such a personal, intimate story about how the show or my books or whatever touched their lives. Like, who would ever get sick of that, right?
But that goes back to like something you talked about in the book, is that each person, whether it would be me or my camera person or my director, if they met you and said, "I remember the show," they're going to have not only different likes or maybe dislikes even, but how it affected them differently. So you're never going to get the same answer. I mean, unless it's like,
And when people write reviews and they go, "I hate that guy. Why did he do that?" Or, "She's so tough. Nobody would ever really be like that." It's like, well, there's a little Ellen Corby and Mary Bernadette in 1 year.
Exactly.
And there are, but and that at least gets people talking, because then you at least know that you made someone angry. And it had a reaction, right?
Oh,
and
my goodness. My goodness, the letters will be flowing in about that last comment. No, they won't. But anyway,
it makes people think, and that's rewarding. Like I said, if people think or it hits them and they have some emotion, it's all worth it.
There you go. And it was well worth having Mary join us. Well worth the work and the cajoling.
You're so good, Larry.
And
sorry.
Karen Orbach, thank you so much. You have no idea. The check is in the mail, sweetheart. Mary McDonough, The House on Honeysuckle Lane. For more information, www.marymcdonough.com. My goodness, again, just a pleasure to have you. I have so many more questions, so you will have to come back on. By the way, your friend Judy Norton says hello. So I talked to her. Yes, your TV sis. So anyway, hang there with us. And again, thank you for coming, and enjoy your dinner tonight. I'm not invited, but I'm not close enough to go to the.
Now I need to go be a wife and a mom. So
yes,
sorry, Larry.
There you go. All right. Well, we bid Mary farewell. We thank you for joining us on this episode of Studio 411. We hope you enjoyed the program, and we certainly did, and look forward to seeing you folks again next time on Studio 411. Take care. Have a great week.